For the last few entries, it feels like the Far Cry series has been in a bit of a paradox. Every new entry has included some sort of villain that feels like a self-aware commentary on different parts of the world and society, but then it's balanced out with formulaic gameplay that boils down to some goofy physics-based shooting gameplay, similar to the Just Cause series. Far Cry 6 looked to change a lot of that, with Breaking Bad's Giancarlo Esposito playing the villain and the return of the voice protagonist taking center stage. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your thoughts on the recent entries, Far Cry 6 is very much just more Far Cry. As someone that's had a love-hate relationship with the recent Far Cry games, the new story and focus on a voice protagonist had me excited to experience this new story. Taking place in the fictional South American country of Yara, based on the depictions of Cuba, you find yourself once again in the middle of a giant sandbox being controlled by an evil yet charismatic villain. In this entry, the villain is the dictator Antoine Castillo, played by Giancarlo Esposito. Like many of Esposito's previous roles, he's a scary yet charming man that wants both complete control of his country, while also hoping to lead his son in the footsteps so that he may eventually continue Castillo's legacy. His son Diego, played by Coco's Anthony Gonzalez, struggles between the morals and the actions of his father. Caught at the crossroads, we see the juxtaposition between the two often lead to the series' most tense moments. Now, where does that leave us? Well, we play the role of Dani Rojas, who can either be male or female. They're a Yara Armed Forces soldier turned refugee who tried to flee Yara only to be caught and be the sole survivor of their boat. Now stuck on Yara, they join the rebellion in hopes of taking down Castillo and freeing their home once and for all. The over 30-hour story tackles various themes of betrayal, family, and war, though it does lean a bit too into the stereotypes and story tropes with its setting. For example, despite being a Spanish-speaking country, everyone is speaking English with a sprinkle of Spanish while also following very common story tropes like the always drunk but suddenly very wise hero persona as just one of the many friends you'll meet along the way. The overall story does have its own somber moments that occasionally hit, but also misses quite a few times, ultimately leaving me with an ending that was predictable and not all that satisfying. Outside of some memorable performances, a large majority of the story left me feeling lukewarm after being so excited to see what the writers would do with this new setting. For those that like the formulaic gameplay of the series, you'll probably love this one. You're once again dropped into this giant sandbox, this time with the ability to do co-op, going to various outposts to free the people there while also taking out the military. Maybe you'll come across some allies, some weapon upgrades, and more along the way, but whatever the reward, the mission structure stays the same. How you approach these scenarios is completely up to you, go guns blazing or sneak your way around the guards. The game does a great job at giving you a variety of weapons to choose your path, and the gameplay itself will make sure you experiment as there's various types of new enemies that are weak and strong against specific types of weapons. Additionally, different types of soldiers play different roles. Medics might revive a wounded soldier, while the captain can raise the alarm to call in for backup. Scouting out locations and planning out the means of attack will make or break certain missions. The big change in gameplay this time around is the way you go about upgrading your character. Gone is the XP skill tree of games past, replaced by a new inventory system that instead focuses on weapon mods to change your character's abilities. It's an interesting idea on paper, but convoluted and a bit tricky in practice. You see, if you ever want to change out abilities, you have to pause the game, tinker with your inventory, and then go back to the game. I found myself constantly shuffling through weapons to get out a sniper when I had an SMG and vice versa. Some weapon mods also feel like they should have just been a permanent upgrade. Also changed up from prior entries is the Guns for Hire system, now replaced by Amigos. These are animal friends that can act as allies that you control with the point of the camera and the D-pad. Send a giant crocodile named Guapo toward an unsuspecting foe as he wreaks havoc and causes a pretty good distraction. Supremos are the new ultimate abilities that use uranium to create these jaw-dropping weapons like a rocket launcher in the form of a backpack. It really does start to push the goofiness of the series toward the more crazy sandbox sim. Personally, the gameplay, while very redundant throughout the series, I still am fond of, but only for a few hours before I start to feel like it overstays its welcome. Usually a great story or interesting characters helps balance that out for the Far Cry series, but Far Cry 6 isn't the successor I was hoping it'd be when it comes to writing. Sure, the goofier moments can be a lot of fun, but it also feels very weird to take such a serious story and juxtapose it with a gun that shoots burnt copies of the Macarena, or playing a cockfighting minigame. A lot of these gameplay moments felt like an odd mix of actual good representation and then stereotypes, while also trying to pander to Western media's interpretation of Hispanic culture for laughs. Far Cry 6 features a beautifully saturated and vibrant world. The country of Yara is filled with life, from the citizens to the various forms of wildlife that you'll hunt or they'll hunt you. As far as the sandbox goes, it's a giant playground to ride around on horseback or just cause havoc for the military forces, whether in the forest or in the city. Animation work gets a noticeable upgrade. I love the transition back to third-person view for cutscenes featuring our character. Outside of the facial expressions and the performance capture seeing significant improvements, seeing our character in third person helps solidify our connection to that character. I do wish the lighting was a bit better though, as there are moments where the assets would cut through other assets, like a lens flare against a tree fading in and out of the asset rather than shining through them. As far as performance goes, I was only able to test out performance on the next-gen consoles as the patch for the older consoles wasn't available at the time of writing this review. On both PS5 and Xbox Series X, I was able to maintain a dynamic 4K 60 frames per second target pretty consistently. It was only in a few cutscenes where I noticed the occasional drop, but for the most part, the game handled that 60 frames per second target beautifully. On Xbox Series S, that's lowered to a dynamic 1440p at 60 frames per second that has a similar performance to the more powerful consoles, only at a lower resolution. Unfortunately, you don't have the option to prioritize resolution or frame rate, a feature that would have been greatly benefited on the Xbox Series S. Far Cry 6 features a beautiful collection of music inspired by the voices and culture of Argentina, like the capital Buenos Aires. Reminiscent of the dark memories in those countries, the fictional country of Yara comes to life. It's a beautiful soundtrack that captures the setting marvelously. There's even a touch of licensed music here, although that tends to come in the moments that are more for entertainment reasons, rather than to evoke some sort of touching or somber moment, so they didn't hit as hard as the OST. The real eye-catcher with the sound design though is the performance done by the respective two actors playing Danny, and Giancarlo Esposito as the president with his son Anthony Gonzalez. I greatly missed having a voice protagonist and an equally important and well-played villain that would send shivers down my spine. Far Cry 6 is very much more Far Cry like 4 and 5 before it, and if you enjoyed those games, you're probably gonna love this one. For me, I enjoyed those games to some extent, but didn't think that the writing had the potential they evoked, and after a few hours of each, their gameplay started to feel a bit too formulaic for me. The same feelings are here in Far Cry 6, although I find myself conflicted with some of the choices made here. I love the villain for example, but the overall story was predictable, and not being able to see the villain outside of some big cutscenes was a bit disappointing. Some writing elements regarding the setting walk the thin line of funny to stereotype, and the gameplay feels largely unchanged, with the changes feeling worse than prior entries, like the skill tree changes. If you loved the Far Cry series before, then you're gonna love this one, but if you've been wanting for some improvements or changes, then this one isn't gonna do anything for you.